It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us. This is the Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Sean Paisley. I'm on the cowboy hat that I picked up at the antique store today. Thought I'd rock it. And as always, I'm joined alongside my co-host, Mr. Andrew J. Van Beber V. How are we feeling?
I want to tell you something. That is a happening hat that you're wearing right there. I feel like I need to be eating mayonnaise sandwiches or kissing my sister or something. I don't quite know what I need to be doing yet. So
a little bit of both. I need a lot more mayonnaise, but my Crohn's, it makes it all spicy. When you get that spicy food, it flares the Crohn's up. So,
yeah. Sorry.
By the wayside is how I take it.
No, I'm doing pretty good. We we both had a very, very busy week last week. Somebody got hitched.
That's what they say.
It was a beautiful ceremony. Had a lot of fun. We, you surprised me by cutting it off at 11, but that's okay. That was not just my choice. I was told that is the Clarksville ordinance. So, and I was like, well, who's going to be there 24/7 is the hard part, because you'd hope that the lovely Pike County sheriffs, that if they were going to show up in Clarksville, would hopefully be handling the meth problem and not the too loud wedding that's way up on the hill. Nobody can hear, right?
Beggars can't be choosers. You take it where you get it. What's funny about that too, we actually lucked out because not 2 hours later, probably just before 1 o'clock, the power went out all of Clarksville for probably like 2 or 3 hours. So we definitely lucked out.
Yeah, that was I tell you what, that was the humidity was about enough to knock over a horse that day. And man, I think all of us I very just to let you know, I very seldomly wear a suit, and from my standpoint, so this is what I was, I was Van Beber and son, Van Beber, sometimes son, as Sean said to me before the broadcast. We were glad to do the music, and the funny part was this, though. So on Friday afternoon, we were finishing up Vacation Bible School, and the running rule amongst me and Sean and Trey, I don't know, it's an unwritten rule. We don't really discuss it, but we know that if we're busy, and for example, I think it was either today or yesterday, I called Sean. I think it was yesterday. And it was yesterday. So I called Sean, and he went to voicemail. And he just said, hey, doing some work stuff, junk, call you later. Everything okay? And yeah, okay. And that's usually our rule of thumb, that, we're pretty laid back. We don't get bent out of shape or anything like that, and okay, we'll just connect later. But last Friday, we're taken down for Vacation Bible School, and pops up on my phone, Sean Phillips. So, all right. In the middle, I'll send it to voicemail. Not a minute and a half later, rings again. It says Sean. And I said, okay, well, this is, if I get there's something major going on, because Sean, Sean's usually really super cool about that. And so I pick it up, and he's like, hey, what you doing? I said, oh, I'm just here, VBS cleaning up. Cool. Hey, I need you to just straight into it. Hey, you think you'd, I'll just throw something at you here. He's like, He said, could you possibly officiate the wedding tomorrow? So there I was, and I couldn't say no to that, and so but it was my honor and a blessing. Beautiful wedding, wonderful time. We had a blast. I enjoy catching up with so many. I love all my students, but I have what I call my golden era of students from about a little bit before your guys' class. Landon Hall and all those guys, and on through you guys, and on down. And it's kind of my golden era, and I just love reconnecting. Just seeing a ton of some of our listeners, the Lintons, who I know who listen to us, Matt Furcus, who catches us from time to time, just a bunch of great people, and enjoying sitting and visiting and talking with people. Chris Meyer, just a bunch of great people, and dude, we had a blast. We had a good time. We had a good time.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a really good time. And so for our listeners, is this better?
Yes.
Mic check.
Yes.
Good? Okay.
You're good. Yep.
Yeah. No, it was a great time. And yes, there was a lot thrown at us the week of the wedding with getting everything set up and ready, and COVID was apparently struck its ugly neck at us.
That was weird.
2 days before the ceremony, my baker called, said they had COVID and they could no longer do our cake. So,
and whoever did the cake did a fantastic job, by the way.
So I really lucked out, and I've got a big shout out. I'm not sure if she listens to our show, but if you are in the sun must have gone down a little bit. If you are in the Pike or Lincoln County area and you are in need of a birthday cake, look no further than asking Jimmy Burnham, out of Bowling Green, Missouri. Look her up.
Yes.
She does a phenomenal job.
She does
with
great work.
Cakes. Insanely great work, very timely. And so I had been in contact with her. She was going to do a surprise cake for me that I was surprising Tony with. And she did, and it came in clutch. But when I found out from our main cake baker they couldn't, I called her, asked her, I was like, hey, is there any way you could do another one? She unfortunately didn't have time just because of other projects she had going on. But I lucked out. There was a baker at Sam's Club in Wentzville that I said, this is what we were going to do. This was the vision. And she did everything that she could to get as close to that. And they knocked it out of the park. So they did a phenomenal job. And then, the day before the wedding, a mutual friend of Tony and I was going to originally officiate the wedding. And he gave me a call and said, hey, I've got COVID. He was feeling fine, but definitely didn't want to get it to anybody there with everything that was going on. And it wasn't even a conversation. Tony and I looked at each other for about 10 seconds and said, hey, we're going to call V, because V's the only one that we can have that can do it and that we want to do it. So, so thank you for being flexible and adapting. It was an honor to have you up there. And no, it was a great day. And then of course, like after that, everything started rolling in the rest of the world as well. So we are definitely playing catch up. And I know that there's been a lot that has matriculated since we last.
I tell you what, when we take a week off, things happen. If
things are ever stagnant, we'll know what to do.
Jeez. So where do you want to start at? There's a billion different places to go. I mean, we can talk about. We now know that who with the Democratic National Convention looming, and we presumably are going to have Kamala Harris as the candidate, and the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, who will be Harris's running mate. This guy is a former, like yourself, National Guardsman, high school teacher, football coach. Took his team to the state championship. Uh, Hardcore. I mean, Democrat. I like the fact that he called J.D. Vance and Donald Trump in a speech a couple weeks ago. Just called them weird. He said they're just weird people, you know. But he started after he actually retired. After he retired from teaching, he went into Congress, or he ran for Congress, got elected to Congress. He is, he's come under some criticism, as you know, he's caught criticism in the past. He was governor of Minnesota during the George Floyd riots. Was that 2020? That was 2020, right? And so he caught a lot of flack from George. Basically 3 days allowed rioting to occur in Minneapolis. They're Minnesota right now they're still, some of the stuff is still in court over. They had 75 COVID fraud cases in dealing with COVID money that was to be going to certain things, and how basically how a lot of that happened under his watch, not implicating anything with walls or anything like that, but a lot of that. And then he was one of those also during COVID. They were one of those states that had the hardcore lockdown, and he even had set up a hotline that you could call if your neighbor or somebody you saw was not wearing a mask during COVID. And so he is a pro-choice guy. He's other than that, he's rank and file Democrat. When you watch the guy, he comes across as a down to earth guy. But to me, he is your standard line Democrat. He's rank and file. And then on the other hand, you have J.D. Vance, who got his start as an Ohio senator, and he's a young guy, 39 years old, and he caught he wrote it was on the, I don't know where it was at on the New York Times bestseller list, but he wrote a book. He started getting national attention called Hillbilly Elegy, which is about him growing up in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in Ohio, and how he, some of his childhood trauma growing up in poverty, how his mother was on and off drugs for so many years and everything, and just the abuse and everything that he rubs the left totally the wrong way. He's really he criticizes in his book Hillbilly Elegy, and some of the excerpts that I've looked at. He's kind of like one of these guys that if you don't pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, you're part of this weak generation and all this other stuff. And he made what he's gone down as saying, and this is on record, that if he was vice president in Trump's first election, or in his re-election campaign back in 2020, he would have went along and with what Trump said, followed what Trump said, and tossed out the electoral college votes. So when you see these two guys, not that, I don't know, to you, I'll just ask you before we get into it, how important is a vice presidential candidate to you? Does that really make any kind of a difference for you, or does it matter?
Honestly, in this election, it felt like the VP selection was bigger this year than it's felt in the past. I'll just be honest. I think that, especially with Kamala, it was always who now is she going to pick? Who now is she going to pick? and it's kind of funny because they kind of went, polar opposite of the spectrum. Kamala went with someone that's, looking to be everybody's grandpa, kind of thing. Sweet, caring old man kind of vibes and looks to him. And then you have Trump, who for the longest time when we were talking about Biden and when we were getting into things with, and then of course the narrative switch that Trump was just too old to run things. He went almost as young as you can when it comes to selecting an individual to be your running mate. So when it comes to both of them, I'm with you. A lot of the things, when you break it down, you look at Kamala's running partner's track record within the last 4 years, very interesting of how he handled the George Floyd protest, of how he handled COVID specifically. I feel like that is going to be a big one that is going to be talked about a lot at the debate. I think that Trump's running mate is some of the flame that he's going to use because again, it's also very interesting because I think that how at least on the news, how it seems the polls are looking where Trump had such a large lead over Biden, and not just over Biden, but the consensus around Kamala was the reason why this is a problem is because she was incompetent as his running mate. And now we're seeing that, at least according to the news, that she's trending better than Trump is, which I think is, I personally think is crazy.
Yeah, I thought people.
I'm not gonna beat the horse dead. I'm not a fan of either candidate by any stretch of the means. No. This is actually one of the ones where voting in this election is going to be really tough because even the third party candidate that I liked is now like, I don't know. He's just spouting out like CTE levels of just ridiculousness at this point. Like,
he was.
You killed a bear and left it in
so you saw
Central Park, wherever.
So you saw the interview that he did on that podcast that Travis sends to us sometimes. I can't think. Yeah, I watched some of that interview. It looks dark at your house there, by the way. So
yeah. It's. I apologize. I'm not in the house. I'm in the RV. Oh. So it's.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But no, when I looked at so this weekend when they released the poll, it was NPR. I think it was NPR, PBS, and somebody else they showed a 51-48 polling number, and then even Fox shows it as a 2-point lead. And what's really scary is in that same poll that was done by NPR and PBS also shows Harris leading Trump with the independent voters 53-44. So I'm with you, Sean, in saying that what was what was going to be a walk away. Pretty much was a walk away for Trump is now turned into something interesting. And now what you don't hear anything about in the news now is, hey, what's Joe doing? He's an afterthought now. Joe has entered into that. Usually you don't enter into that period until you've lost the re-election campaign, which is called being a lame duck. He is totally into lame duck territory. Nobody's focusing on what Joe is saying or what he's not saying anymore, and he's irrelevant. And what I look at, the thing that's really concerning about this campaign, and I'm with you. I could give a rat's hairy butt about either one of these guys. The guy who, and like you said, the guy who we support, the guy that I, with you and Travis, we all three liked there in the beginning, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now is just, he's going off the weird crap-o-meter. I mean, he's just really, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to vote. and I don't really want to vote. I don't even know who. I haven't done my research because I was going to go with Kennedy. I still might go with Kennedy, but I don't. I usually vote Libertarian, and I don't even know who's running the Libertarian campaign right now. But this, I'm kind of afraid of what either one of these presidencies will look like. Either one of these, you know, because like you said earlier, what ammunition now? I mean, when you think of, okay, well, Harris is fair game. But I mean, I don't think you have to be the head checkout clerk at Walmart to know that who was pulling the strings. Pretty much, she was probably one of the main ones who was in the background during this whole administration, who was pulling the strings. And so, if we see a Harris presidency, are we going to end up in World War III? With the situation that's going on well, I mean, Iran did a missile attack yesterday on a U.S. air base in Iraq. Okay, and the jury's still out about what's going to happen there. We've got the whole thing with Ukraine, and are we going to keep on fighting Ukraine, or are we going to And Iran is also launching missiles or somebody's. I forgot who they said, if it was Iran or who was launching missiles at Israel for a Hamas assassination of a Hamas leader. So you've got that whole situation, and I think you go from one extreme to the other. And I'll let you. I'm rambling, but we'll just start with the foreign affairs scene. I mean, if I see a Trump presidency, okay, I'm seeing the whole thing about. I mean, the rhetoric is defunding Ukraine, saying, okay, you guys are screwed. You guys are out on your own. You guys are going to be doing your own thing. We've got to worry, his whole America First agenda, which is, again, is what historians will call a populist agenda, which is, is always, and we've had tons of populist presidents in the past who've basically said, let's worry about our own house right now, get our own house in order before we go off into somewhere else. So, I mean, and then, I would like to think that Trump would continue to back Israel because he was the one who moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I don't know. What are your thoughts on these two?
Yeah, I mean, again, we've had the experience of what Donald Trump's foreign policy looked like. I felt like, from my own experience, the only thing that really, you can look at it either way. I don't look at it as a positive thing, but some people might, and that's totally fine, is Trump's relationship with Putin, while be it not very friendly, was well, how do I phrase that? I know that there's a lot of talk that that Trump said, "Oh, I was tough on Putin. But he also let Putin get away with a lot too.
Oh yeah, he did.
Not as much as Biden has allowed. And that's the thing is if we're taking Kamala at face value, we're taking arguably one of the worst dealings in foreign policy that we've seen in a long period of time. How they've handled the situation in the Middle East has not been pleasant. I'm on the side of I think we should support Israel. That's my take on it. Whether I'm right or wrong doesn't really matter. The half-assed attempts at humanitarian aid to Pakistan has been very interesting. There's a way to be hard on Hamas while also letting Israel know, like, there are certain things you can't just do just to do it because you feel wrong. And us trying to, slap a stick-on Band-Aid on an artery wound doesn't necessarily do any good. I think that the border, if we count the border as a foreign policy crisis, has also been just inexcusable, outright inexcusable with how poorly the border has been handled over the last 3.5 years. And I think that that's one of the toughest ones for me is we have friends. I have friends and family that are close that are currently dealing with the mess of the Biden foreign policy when it comes to dealing with different nations and dealing with border nations. And um, that is one of the toughest parts about this whole election is for me, looking at it, my morals I don't necessarily think align with Trump's at all. I would like to think, I have not paid too many prostitutes hush money
Nor
for
have you taken part in shady business practices either.
correct. But what I can say is that, and I know obviously the deeper conversation of the economy and different things. I really just feel like the Democrats are currently inept right now. We are not in a situation where, um, you know, I'm not going to call it the socialist route, but the emphasis on socialism is not what this nation needs right now. We need a little bit more action and accountability. And what I have seen is, and this happens with presidencies, but we are still almost at the end of Biden's tenure, and we are hearing so much about how so many of the problems that we're facing are because of Trump, because of Trump, because of Trump. And I think that rhetoric is over with. Like, that's one of the crazy things about all this.
We did the same thing with Obama too. I mean, during Obama's
no, 100%, we did. But I think what I'm seeing more now than we did like when Biden or when Barack Obama, because yes, during the recession, so many people jumped that yes. And so, but what I think is crazy is we are almost done with this Biden presidency. And there are Democrats that talk like Trump is still in power, making decisions that are affecting people's day-to-day lives now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this man hasn't been in office since 2021. So what are we talking about?
That's a lot of what when I look at in history, there are some actions of a president that can carry maybe a year and a half, possibly two. When you're saying 3 years, okay, and I'll give you a prime example. When Bill Clinton, when he was president, he balanced the budget for one of the first times in U.S. In recent U.S. history, and when the after effects of that, came into being, we started having a surplus, and that surplus came about during George Bush's presidency. And so George Bush was able, the Republicans had to deal with, not deal with, but they could pat themselves on the back and say, oh, well, look, we were able to do this, this, and this because now we're able to give these refund checks back to Americans. And anyway, so it wasn't like big time stimulus checks, but it was still, you look at a previous president doing what he did, and he's able to, okay, now we're able to, that carries over. All right. Donald Trump, what did he do? He cut the the corporate tax rates. I think it was like from 35% down to 21% midway through his presidency. And so, a lot of people are saying, well, that just puts more profit in the big boys' pockets, and so we're going to balance that out, and we're going to raise wages, just to force the big company's hand. And what ends up happening is you get which is part of, not the whole thing of where this inflation rate started going crazy. And it depends on what economist you talk to. Some will call this, okay, this is a correction period. We're in the middle of a correction. Okay, we're having to make adjustments. We're having to make adjustments for this, and that's kind of why people are saying, okay, well, now inflation rates are starting to drop because people have more money in their pockets. But the issue is people don't have more money in their pockets because corporations have raised their prices. So we went from foreign. Now when we talk domestic, so here's the domestic side of this coin. This is what bothers me the most is our economy. Outside of anything else that these presidents have done, economically is about the only thing that affects me and you and the common Joe American. We've shared so many times on this show. We've talked about inflation and how we've seen one of the biggest inflationary jumps in the last 3 years than and more than I've seen in recent memory. I mean, I can talk about, going, oh, back when I was 16. Well, I mean, back when I was 16, I was paying 95 cents a gallon for gas, but that's another story. Also, minimum wage was 4.75 at the time. But you can't just look at these things and just say, okay, well, this is normal. This is not normal. I mean, what it takes, you have a family of 4, I have a family of 4. What it takes to feed our families is ridiculous. But what another problem could be, and I'll just pull this up. This is one of the, I was reading this article earlier before the show tonight. This guy who he writes for the Nevada Current, which I believe is their online newspaper or something. But he says saddling Americans with the regressive financial burden of a 10% tariff, which amounts to a $1,700 tax on Americans, will increase inflation that falls heaviest on those in poverty. That is another Trump promise. Replacing income taxes with tariffs, as Trump has also suggested, would send millions of families in poverty hurtling towards ruin, not only paying much higher sales taxes and other fees, which is to still try to fund the government, but seeing vast swaths of support systems removed from under their feet, costs going up, but also forestall interest rates coming down. Devaluation of the dollar, as they propose, would also jack up inflation rates. So, and there's also another thing that they said that they would cut the corporate tax rate down to 15%, which is trickle down. That's a Republican move. That's trickle down economics, and trickle down economics only happens when corporations share the wealth, and they haven't had a very prominent track record on sharing the wealth. But you go to the flip side, and so what are we seeing from the Democrats? Are we going to see more of the same? Are we going to see an increase? Are we going to see another increase? I'm waiting for the next talk of another wage raise. I mean, well, here's how we'll promise. I'm waiting for the 18 or $20 an hour minimum wage. I'm waiting for it. So I'm rambling, but what's your take on the domestic side of this stuff?
No, I'm in agreement with you. We've seen where, in theory, trickle down economics is potentially the answer that we would all like. The unfortunate side of it is what we've seen is if the big man doesn't make the dollars that pay the shareholders, that pay the CEOs, that pay the board members what they want to see, the little guy pays for it. The employee pays for it. The consumer pays for it every single time. You take a look at, we've even talked about it in one of the biggest killers. I personally single-handedly have witnessed the killer of a small community was a town that I care for very deeply in Clarksville, had a plant called Wholesome that ran and kept a bunch of the individuals in that town employed. And when Wholesome shut down, the entire economy of that little town collapsed up under itself. The town can't even sustain a gas station anymore. It's got a drug problem that it didn't have before. It's got a lack of police that aren't there because they're spread thin, which is truthfully just it's unfortunate. it's tough. I believe in a free market. I believe that you should be able to make as much as you want to make. But there has to be something. There has to be some comeuppance that makes sense for everybody, to where if you have these tops, these suits up top, you need to find a way, you know, at the end of the day, unfortunately, we know that corporations are going to be greedy. It's not even you go to a grocery store, you go to Walmart, you buy groceries, you buy basic necessities for your family. That is a clear-cut example about how all these companies are greedy. I saw a video where a guy walked into a Target. I don't know if he was in New York or California, might have even been Illinois, where he goes into the aisle and he goes to an Old Spice deodorant. He's in a Target, by the way. He is not in like a Walgreens or some kind of like local mom and pop where, you know, he's in a Target, and a stick of Old Spice deodorant was $8.89 before tax.
God.
Deodorant.
Oh my God.
And at a store, you know, and I'm obviously there's cheaper deodorant out there, but Old Spice is pretty much one of the, hey, that we're right in the middle. We're not the cheapest thing that's going to leave you broken out, but we're, you know,
yeah.
They used to pride themselves on, we're not a $10 deodorant. You're right, you're a $9 deodorant. So it's one of those things where the cost of living is going up, and we've beat this horse dry, you know, too, talking about how tough it can be. Going to the grocery store is a scary experience.
Yeah.
And you know, you and I are individuals that have, you know, level heads. Like the thing that always gets me is when I look at how hard it is on myself, I have a great support system. Yeah. I have parents, I've got a wife, I've got friends, I've got people that, you know, if I was drowning, it'd be my own fault, and it would be in about an inch of water because the people that are around me just wouldn't let me drown.
Right.
And that is just not the case for so many people in this country. And so if I know how scared I am and how it weighs on me, I can't imagine 70% of the rest of the United States. And then on top of that, the thing that always gets me are just kids. Kids are kids, and the amount that are struggling and dealing with poverty, that are on free lunches, that are, you know, that's the thing that gets me the most. And that is why, for me, you know, call it what you want, but I care more about, our kids going to be able to eat? Is the government going to make sure that our kids can eat school lunches, or that their parents can afford groceries, more than I am on states allowing kids to have a sex change at 6 years old? You know, our priorities, I think, are spaced out a little bit.
Right.
And unfortunately, it seems to be one side over the other that keeps trying to, you know, force the hands of a lot of parents that are, hey, we're focused on social issues right now, when social issues might only affect 1% of the population. What about the other 99% that are drowning right now?
And that's another. So that's another. You mentioned two issues. I'll get to. I want to talk. And you've opened. That's a good segue. First of all, with education. So one thing, I've always had a gripe with the U.S. Department of Education. Some of the programs that they pass down the pike are just straight up ridiculous. When through George Bush, when they did No Child Left Behind, that was the most idiotic thing that came down the pike. By 2015, 100% of the children in America's schools will be able to read at grade level. That was the most ridiculous thing that I had ever heard. It's a great goal. It's a great goal, and it's an impossible goal. But Trump wants to get rid of the Department of Education. He's been on record. He has a 10-point plan that he has announced. I don't know all the points of the plan, but a lot of it is restoring parent choice. Okay, which leads to the ugly voucher word, which is what will undercut your local school districts, your small town school districts. And I don't want my property taxes going to this school, so I'm going to use it to I'm going to get a voucher to pull my money out of the public school, and I'm just going to do homeschooling, which is, I don't have a problem with homeschooling. But when you pull your tax dollars out of, like you said, in Clarksville when Wholesome closed, we went through a major downslide in
Yeah, I remember.
And
we shut a whole building down.
Yeah, and we are, by the way, thanks to great administration with our new administration,
now getting that building fully back up.
That building will now be half open, which is the first time that half of that building will be used in close to 10 years, 10 or 11 years.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
so, but now Trump is also, he's incentivizing schools to eliminate teacher tenure. Now, this whole thing, and that's part of the whole problem that I see with education is, let's start blaming the teachers for the failure of students. Okay, well, how about we put responsibility back on the students to do learning? And so trying to put the education department on its head and put more into state control, and I am a big states' rights guy. Let states take care of state stuff. But when it comes to something like education, because not only does the U.S. Department of Education do funding for secondary elementary schools, they're the ones who are funding Pell Grants, okay? I could not have gotten through college without my Pell Grant because I came from a low-income family. If it wasn't for Pell Grant, a large portion of my education was paid for by a Pell Grant, okay? Cutting the Department of Education would, in effect, would eliminate Pell Grants. And we see, and this is the Republican thing, this is one of my biggest gripes with Republicans is this move towards privatized education, okay? Making it to where, okay, we're going to have these charter schools and we're going to have these magnet schools and that are funded more by private money than is state money, okay? I don't like that. On the flip side of that, you have Kamala Harris, okay, who is still pushing that, and you mentioned it earlier, that whole socialist, who some people call it a social agenda of having, debt-free college, okay? She wants to make, and she wants to, some great ideas. She wants to make investments in historically black colleges, what do they call those, the HBCUs. Yeah, which, that I think that's great too. But then going into that second thing that you mentioned, okay, this whole thing of I hate that so much of the attention of our media, of our people, goes to these social issues. You and I have slightly different views on abortion, which is fine, and I still believe that a woman, and especially with health issues, should have the right to be, my wife wouldn't be here if it wasn't for what, when she had her ectopic pregnancy. And then, the whole gender thing, we've blown this thing way out of the water. What you're talking about is what, less than 5% of the population? Okay.
Probably lower, but yeah.
And I do not agree with the transgender movement. I don't agree with these kids, having, what do they call it, gender
dysmorphia.
Yeah. This whole idea of kids being confused, instead of just dealing with it and saying, oh, well, I'm going to just let my kid decide what they want to do. That should not be a political issue. That's the parents, to me, that's the parents saying, raise my kid, legislate for my kid, instead of just saying, raise your kid. You have a child, okay? A child is, if I would have let Bradley and Bryson get away with some of the ideas they had back when they were, and you're just entering into that phase right now, I'm sure that your kid, I'm sure Jam's probably threw some wild things out there before in the past, and who knows what Lily will come up with, but just some of these things that were parents allowing their kids to do. No, shut that down, and you shouldn't have to legislate that,
Mm-hmm.
And when people say, I one of the things that I had problems with back in the 2000 teens, and I got criticized for it because I was a youth pastor. I'm a youth leader now. They go, we need to have Bible classes in school. No, we don't. That's the job.
Absolutely not.
That's the job
Yeah.
of the church. That's the job of the
Yep.
church. That's not the job of the
Yep.
schools. And Reagan always said this. One of the things that Reagan said, you cannot legislate morality. You cannot. You can't legislate morality. And I know that rubs a lot of our Republican friends and listeners on the show raw. But one of my staple points that I have said over and over again, it begins in the home with parents
Yep.
being present, parents being active. I make it a point every day, at least during the summertime, going in my kids' room 4 or 5 times a night, just wrestling around with them, goofing around, watching it. If they're watching a TV show, sitting there and watching it with them, talking with them about stuff, watching silly TikTok videos, or just having straight up conversations. People just said, here's the phone, go do something, get away from me. That's not where it's at. Anyway, that's my soapbox. Sorry, I jumped on that soapbox way too hard.
No, you're good. You're absolutely good. Yeah, I think it's as we do veer into the election season, and probably next week we'll kind of touch on some of the primary stuff that we saw here in the state of Missouri, at least this past weekend. I'm not celebrating all the way, but Cori Bush is not going to be back, and thank the Lord.
Where's it at? Here we go. That actually surprised me a little bit, to tell you the truth.
I
That
have
surprised me.
actually really enjoyed hearing a lot of what Mr. Bell has had to say. So I'll be interested to see how the general election goes, but when maybe we'll do an episode where we each pick a handful of some of the scariest political figures in the world today, and Cori Bush is up there with the AOCs of the world. There's a
St.
time and
Louis
point,
is not for sale.
before we get off here, but there's a time and point for when, like, it's okay for you to have beliefs they're out there, but then when you are actually a psychopath, and then you have crazy psychopath ideas, that's when it becomes a real issue. But no, I definitely
the squad's taking a hit.
Really enjoyed. Yeah, I really did enjoy our conversation.
Yeah.
And hopefully next week will be a little less crazy for the two of us, and we'll be able to tackle some more good things whenever we are back next week.
Yep.
So I'm excited.
All right, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Check out our previous shows and clips on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.